This is J. Krishnamurti's first public talk in Saanen, 1964.
We have made this tent as cool as possible, and I hope you won't feel too hot in here. As you know, we're going to have several talks here and a discussion after all these 10 talks are over. So we have plenty of leisure to talk things over together. And I would like to begin this morning pointing out the extraordinary importance of freedom. And in those we abide, and that we are hedged about by social laws, morality, and the daily troubles and problems. And we are very easily satisfied if we can find some kind of consolation, some kind of escape through all these conflicting, miserable problems. And most of us do not want to be free at all in any direction, at any depth. And it seems to me that it is one of the most necessary, essential things to find out for oneself how to be completely and totally free, absolutely. And whether it is at all possible for the human mind, so heavily conditioned, so caught up in everyday labor, with all its fears, anxieties, with the uncertainty of the future and the constant demand for security, whether it is at all possible for the human mind to radically bring about a mutation which can only take place in complete freedom, and whether it is at all possible for any one of us. And I think, I hope you all might take my coat off, it's too hot. And I think each one of us should be really concerned, at least for these 10 days, 3 weeks that we're here, to discover, not verbally, but through the verbal analysis, linguistic analysis, to go much more deeply into ourselves and find out for ourselves whether it is at all possible to be free. Because without freedom, one cannot discover what is true and what is false. Without freedom, there is no depth to life. Without freedom, we are slaves to every form of influence, to all the social pressures, to the innumerable demands that we are constantly faced with. And if you, as a human being, as an individual, if you can really go into yourself very, very searchingly, ruthlessly, and find out if it is at all possible for each one of us to be so completely free. Because it's only in freedom that there can be change. And we do have to change. Not superficially, not in the sense of merely pruning a little bit here and there, but bring about a radical mutation in the very structure of the mind. And that's what I feel is very important to talk about, to discuss, and see how far each one of us can go into this. Because change is necessary. You know what I mean by change? To think totally differently. To bring about a state of mind in which there is no fear at all of any kind, no anxiety at any time. No sense of conflict. No sense of this everlasting struggle to achieve, to become, to be something. And to be totally rid of fear. And to find this out, I think one has to understand this question of the teacher and the taught and what is learning. Here, there is no teacher. And there is no the person who is taught. We are learning. So one has to be completely rid of this idea of someone who is going to instruct you, to tell you what to do. So that this attitude, this relationship between the teacher and you is entirely different. Because we are learning. You are not being taught. And so, if one understands that, really, that you are here not to be taught at all by anybody. And there is no teacher to teach you. No savior to save you. To point out anything to you. You have to do everything yourself. And that demands tremendous energy. And this energy is dissipated, totally lost, degraded, when there is this relationship of the teacher and the taught. So, I hope during these talks here and the discussions that are to follow, there will be no sense of the teacher and the taught. It would really be marvelous if we can wipe that out completely. There is only learning. One learns either through study, books, through experience, or being instructed. Instruction, experience, and study. Those are generally the way of learning, ways of learning. Which is to commit to memory what to do, what not to do, what to think and what not to think, how to feel, how to react, through experience, through study, through analysis, through probing, introspective examination. One stores up all that one has learned as memory, and that memory responds to further challenges and demands. And from that learning more and more, with which we are quite familiar. That's the only way we learn. I think that's fairly clear, isn't it? I don't know how to fly a plane. I learn. I'm instructed. Experience. The memory of it retained. Then I fly. That's all the learning with which we are acquainted. Through study, experience, and instruction. Which is commit everything to memory as knowledge. And that knowledge functions. Whenever it is demanded, whenever there is a challenge, whenever we have to do something. I think there is a different way of learning than this, which is to commit to memory. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. First of all, to understand that, one must be completely rid of authority. Otherwise you can't learn. You are merely then are instructed and repeat. I don't know if you... That's why it's very important to understand the nature of authority. It is that prevents learning. Learning which is not the accumulation as knowledge committed as memory. That memory responds always in patterns. There is never freedom. I don't know if you have a man burdened with knowledge, burdened with with the instructions, with the things he has learned through centuries upon centuries, committed. He is never free. He may be most extraordinarily erudite. But his accumulation of knowledge prevents him from being free and therefore learning. We can see why we accumulate knowledge. Not only to go to the moon, not only various forms of scientific, physiological, technological knowledge and so on, those are necessary. But also, we accumulate knowledge in order to be safe, to function without disturbance, to act always within the pattern, to be always secure, never to go beyond the border of our own knowledge, information, instruction, never to be uncertain and the fear of uncertainty. Therefore, we accumulate knowledge. Psychologically, I'm talking about. And that prevents complete block. It blocks completely freedom. So if we begin to question what is freedom, one has to question not only authority but knowledge. Therefore, if you are merely being instructed and accumulating, what you have heard, what you have read, your own experience, merely accumulating, then you will find that you can never be free. You're always functioning within the pattern of the known. So, what is one to do? I see how the mind and the brain functions. The brain being the animalistic, progressive, evolutionary thing, and it lives, it functions within that, within its own experience, with its own knowledge, with its own fears, hopes, and all the rest of it. And this brain, being everlastingly active, safeguarding itself, protecting itself, it has to. Otherwise it would be destroyed. So, it must have security. And so it gathers every kind of information. It obeys every kind of instruction, benefiting itself, creating a pattern, and so never being free. There is no spontaneity at all. If one has observed one's own brain and the whole functioning, of oneself, one is aware of this. So then, what is learning? Is there a different way of learning which is not accumulative, which doesn't become merely a memory, and therefore knowledge, and therefore creating patterns, and therefore never being free? I don't know if you're following all this. We will, as we go on, we've got 10 days, 3 weeks. If you are staying here for all that time. I have to, unfortunately. So is there a different way of learning which doesn't become a burden, which doesn't cripple, which gives freedom? You follow? If you have ever put that question to yourself, one has to find out why the mind clings to authority. The authority of one's own knowledge, the authority of the instructor, the savior, the book, the authority of experience. You follow? Why does the mind, why do you cling to authority? If you have put that question to yourself, not superficially, but deeply, wanting to find out, what would your answer be? Not only the authority of books, but the authority of the church, the authority of the ideal, your own experience, the innumerable books and knowledge that you have gathered, which has become the authority. Why does the mind, why do you cling to those authorities? Technologically, you need authority. That's simple. Apart from that, psychologically, we are always talking about the psychological state of the mind, not the technological authority. Why does the mind cling to psychological authority? Obviously, it clings because it's afraid of the unknown, of tomorrow, of what will happen, the uncertainty, the insecurity. And that's the only reason. So can I and you live without any authority at all? That's a very difficult thing to find out. Authority in the sense of domination, of assertion, of dogmatism, of aggressiveness, wanting to be. wanting to succeed, wanting to be famous, being something, being somebody. Can we live in this world, going to the office and all the rest of it, really in a state of complete humility? That's only in that state that one learns. The mind that's always willing not to know. I think that's the only state of complete humility that you can learn. Otherwise, you're always accumulating and therefore ceasing to learn. Now, can one live in this world in that state? You understand my question? Because a mind that is really learning has no authority, does not seek authority. It doesn't belong to any group, to any society, to any race, to any culture. Because it's in a state of constant learning. Not only of the outward things, but inwardly. And if you are learning, how can there be any kind of authority, any kind of teacher? How can you follow anybody? So if you go into this matter of learning, and that's the only way to live. Not learning from books, I don't mean that. But learning from the movement of your own thoughts, your own being, your own demands. So that your mind is always fresh to look. Not with the jaded look of knowledge, experience that which has learned. So if one understands this really profoundly, then all authority ceases. Then the speaker is of no importance at all. What is important is whether you are learning. Learning the fact about yourself. Learning about the movement of your thought, and you can only learn the fact of that movement. There are observable facts, under the microscope, visual facts, and so on, outward facts. I am talking of the fact of the movement of the mind, and observing that movement and learning and not accumulating, but merely observing and so learning about the fact which takes place in the movement of your being. Huh? Am I? Let me put it in a different way. Truth is not to be, cannot be told to you by another. You have to find it out. The extraordinary state that truth reveals, the immensity of reality and so on, nobody can tell you. Nobody. You have to find it out. There is no authority, there is no guide, there is not another. You have to find it out so as to bring some sense to this extraordinary life. You are on a journey by yourself, totally, completely alone. Neither wife, husband, books, companions. You have to find it out. Now, how do you set about it? You can only take this journey when you can really see the truth that you have to walk completely alone. Not out of bitterness, not out of cynicism, not out of despair, but you see the fact. And it's that fact, and learning about that fact, that sets one free to walk. So no book, no savior, no teacher. They are yourself. So you have to investigate yourself. You have to learn about yourself. You understand? Learn. Not accumulate knowledge about yourself, and with that knowledge look at the movement of thought, at the movement of yourself. I have to learn about myself. That's the only thing I can discover. I have to know myself. And to know myself, I must come to myself with a freshness. With a freedom. Otherwise I can't know myself. I can only then know myself according to some other instructor, some other book, some experience, what I have learned, So, I can't know myself if I am not willing to learn about myself. And I can't learn about myself if I am merely applying knowledge and with that knowledge look at myself. I don't know, I think this is fairly clear. Myself is an extraordinary entity. Yourself is an extraordinary, complex, tremendously alive, vital thing. Changing. Undergoing all kinds of experiences, accumulating. A vortex, a center of tremendous energy. I have to learn about it. So there is nobody can teach you about it. That's the first thing to realize. Nobody. When one realizes that, really sees the truth of that, you're already liberated from an extraordinary burden. You're no longer looking at somebody to tell you what to do. There is already the beginning of this extraordinary perfume of freedom. So, I have to know myself. Because without learning about myself, there can be no end to conflict. There can be no end to fear, to despair. There can be no understanding of death and the ending of fear. So I have to learn about myself, not as a self, as saving myself. Because if I understand myself, I understand the whole human being. Not only me, but you. I understand the whole human relationship. So it is imperative that I understand myself, that I learn about myself. But the physical body, the various responses of the nerves, every movement of thought, what is love, what is affection, the thing called jealousy, the brutality, the whole thing that is me, the you. So learning is not laying the foundation of knowledge. Learning is from moment to moment, watching yourself infinitely. Never condemning, never judging, never evaluating, but merely learning, observing. Because the moment you condemn, interpret, evaluate, you have a pattern of knowledge. And that pattern of knowledge, that experience prevents you from looking, learning. So you see, the mutation at the root of the mind is only possible . when you understand yourself. And there must be mutation. There must be change. I am using the word change in the sense of not being influenced by society, by climate, by experience, by pressure, by strain. Those are merely push you in certain directions. But change that comes about because you understand. Surely there's a vast difference between the change brought about through compulsion and the change that comes spontaneously, naturally, easily, freely. So if you are at all serious, and I think it was rather absurd to come all the way to attend these talks and this heat and put up with a lot of discomfort if you are not serious. And if you are serious, then these 3 weeks here will offer a very good opportunity for learning, for observation, for real deep inquiry. Because you see, I feel our life is so superficial. We really have no depth. We know lots, we have experienced a great deal, we can talk very cleverly. We live on the surface. And living on the surface, we try to make that surface very serious. But we are talking about a seriousness, not at the superficial level, but a seriousness that penetrates into the very depths of one's own being. And I feel that if we are not free, really free from worry, from habits, from physical disability, free from fear, then our life becomes extraordinarily shallow and empty. And we grow old and die. So, what we are here for during these 3 weeks is to find out if we can break through this superficial existence that we have so carefully nurtured, and delve into something much deeper. And the delving process is not through authority, not how to do it, because there is nobody that can tell you. What we are going to do together is to learn. To learn what is true in all this. When once you understand it, really understand what is true, then the whole thing is over. And you need ever read a book. No church, no, you don't become a follower. And there is great beauty and great depth, great love in freedom, of which we don't know at all, because we are not free. So our first concern, it seems to me, is to inquire into this freedom. Not only through verbal, linguistic analysis, but also to learn. Being free of the world. Is it too hot? I'm afraid somebody is faint. No. I'm afraid we can't do anything. We have done everything we can to make this inside the tent fairly cool. We can't do any more. No, don't open those, please. Please don't open those. You'll get all the flies. Open them. We can't have these meetings earlier because people come from a distance. So we have to have it at upper stand. And you have to put up with this heat. That's part of the discomfort. You know, one has to discipline oneself. Not impose discipline, not control, but understand this whole question of discipline. To learn about it, to be aware of the heat. Just take this thing, to be aware of this heat. Not be bothered by it. Because the interest, the inquiry, the learning is much more important than the heat and the discomfort of the body. And so, the learning demands discipline. And the very act of learning is discipline. And therefore there needs to be no outward discipline, no control. That is when I I want to listen to what is being said. I want to listen not only verbally, but also to listen to all the reactions which those words awaken in me. To be aware of every movement of thought, feeling, gesture. To be aware that in itself is discipline. And therefore, such discipline is extraordinarily flexible. So, I think we all must realize that the first thing is to discover whether you, as a human being living in a particular culture, community, and so on, demand, as you would demand food, sex, comfort, whether you really demand freedom. And how far and to what depth are you willing to go to discover and to be free? I think that's the only thing that we can do at the first talk. Or rather, that's the only thing we can do during these 3 weeks. Because that's the only thing we can share. You understand? And nothing else. Because everything else becomes sentimentality. Emotionalism. Devotion, all the rest of it, which is too immature. But if you and I are really seeking, inquiring, learning what it is to be free, what it means, then in that abundance we can share. So as I said at the beginning, there is no teacher, no taught. Each one of us is learning. Not about somebody else. You're not learning about me or about your neighbor. You're learning about yourself. If you are learning about yourself, then you are me and your neighbor. And then if you learning about self, then you can love your neighbor. Otherwise you can't. They remain mere words. You can't love your neighbor if you are competitive. Our whole social structure is based on competition. Social, economic, moral, religious structure is based on competition. And yet at the same time, you say you must love your neighbor. The two are impossible. So to understand it, one must have. To understand what love is, what truth is, there must be freedom. And nobody can give that to you. You have to find it through hard work